What's going on YouTube? Super Insane 18 here, and welcome back to another day of this beautiful Tier 0 format that everybody loves so much. We are bringing you an updated Ishizu Tearlament deck profile. Now, this is a list that is based on my own testing as well as the results of YCS Pasadena this past weekend, which, if you didn't know, 26 of the top 32 were Ishizu Tearlaments. That is over 80% of the top cut, so this deck has definitely solidified itself as a Tier 0 contender. Let's go ahead and show you the build. Now, before we actually get into the profile, I do want to say that there is a difference between a deck that you are building for locals and a deck that you are building for an event, so this build is catered a little bit more towards the local scene. You can still do well with it at a big event like a regional or higher level, but I do just want to kind of preface that because there are some changes that I personally would make if I was going into an event, and I will tell you what they are as we get to them. But for now, let's show you guys the build. So we are starting off with the standard Tearlament names. We've got the 3 Merly, the 3 Havness, the 3 Shiren, and the 2 Rhinoheart. Now, a lot of people are back and forth between 2 and 3. If you guys have seen my videos in the past, you know that the reason I play 2 is because I don't own a 3rd, and at this point it's a meme. There's one person in particular, a friend of mine, who is making fun of me for it, so now even if I get the 3rd, probably not going to play it. But it's really personal preference on the Rhinoheart, so it just depends on what you feel is the best ratio for yourself. There were decks in the top cut that did play a difference of 2 or 3, so personal / player preference there. Then onto the Ishizus, we are actually playing 2 copies of Agito. Now, this is something that I didn't really see any of. It was pretty much either 3 or 1. I have found that 2 is the really good number for me. It gives me the option to see it more often, as well as a good option to side out as well. So I think for me personally, I really like 2. Then we have 3 copies of Kelbeck, which is considered to be the best one because it is also a hand trap. Then we have 3 of both the Keldo and the Medora. These are incredible cards for pretty much any match, not just the mirror. If you can DD Crow for 6 cards from either grave, kind of worth it, especially for yourself because you can use it to recycle your own resources, so pretty standard. That's it for the Ishizus. We are playing 3 copies of Herald of Orange Light, just a really good hand trap, as well as the ability to send the cards that you get the effects off of. So for example, if you open up this and either Agito or Kelbeck, you can not only negate and destroy a monster your opponent activates, but you can also get your Kelbeck or Agito to mill 5, and that could start you playing on turn 0 of the duel, even if you lost the dice roll. We are actually playing 1 copy of Diviner of Herald. This is something that I said in my previous build that, after discussing with a lot of people, decided it wasn't really worth it. We were wrong. Diviner is absolutely insane, not just because you can normal it and get one of your effects off of your Ishizu cards immediately, but the fact that it's also a level 2 and you can reborn it with Elf, and it's just a really good card. We are playing only 2 Bestials, and this is the change that I would make if I'm going into a big event, is I would play much more Bestials. For a local scene, I think this is okay, especially because if your opponent is playing Bestials, you can use your Dark to reborn their Magnamut that you probably milled off of your effects, and then the Magnamut will trigger, letting you search your own Druid Swarm at the end. Not just that, but if you mill them yourself, you can also put them back into your deck with the Ishizu cards. But with it being a Tier 0 format, going into a big event, you have to expect that you're going to be seeing primarily mirror matches, so having a higher Bestial count at an event is probably worth it, but for locals, you might not need it. So that is just what I'm playing right now because I don't have any big events coming up, but I will bring you guys an updated profile again once I go to a big event. For now, it's just the 2 Bestials, but you would definitely want to run a bigger count. And that is it for the monsters. Onto these spells, we've got a couple of one-ofs. We've got the Instant Fusion, obviously. We have the Tearlament's Heartbeat because we want an in-archetype main deck out to Mystic Mine. And then we have our Terraforming as well for the field spell because the field spell in this deck is obviously just fucking insane. Excuse my language there, but it's just crazy. That field spell is just one of the nuttiest field spells there is. Then we have the Tearlament Scream at 2. I think that this is a perfect ratio, 1 to use, 1 to mill, and then obviously you can always put it back. That's really with any of these cards, you can just put them back if you need them. And that's it for the 2 ofs. We have 3 of the crazy field spell. Now, this card is insane because you don't have to fuse to activate it. Now with the Ishizu cards, you can return a Tearlament's monster using your Ishizu cards and still activate the effect, so that is one way you can also out Mystic Mine, is if you have this pre-existing and they try to activate mine, you can chain your effect of the Ishizu cards before mine resolves. That will then allow you to activate the Primeval Planet to pop the mine, and honestly, just adding an additional way to pop cards, that's also how this deck gets out of something like Barrier Statue against Flu. It's really just crazy. I think this field spell's insane. It is a Rhoda plus a pop, and that's just nuts. Then we have 3 copies of Triple Tactics Talent. This is a card that if you are not mainboarding in this format, I think you're just crazy. Everybody's going to be activating monster effects on your turn, whether it's the tier mirror match or if it's literally any deck, somebody's going to activate a monster effect on your turn. This card is just absolutely insane in those scenarios, so not much else needs to be said, and that's it for the spells. Then we have 1 Crime and 2 Sullik. The reason for the 2 Sullik is, again, so you have 1 to mill and 1 to use. And then the Crime is an Omni Negate, which is really just nutty, so that is it for the main deck. 42 cards. Let's show you guys the extra. Now, the extra deck is relatively unchanged, but there are a couple of changes, so we are going to talk about them when we get there. Starting things off, we have 1 of each of the Tearlament monsters, our Kit Callus, our Roll Callus, and our Kaleido Heart. You don't need more, you can't function on less, so this is just kind of the standard ratio. Then we have 1 copy of Mud Dragon of the Swamp. We did put back the Garura, Wings of Resonant Life. This is something that I took out in my previous builds because I wasn't playing Super Poly, but honestly, just having it as a fusion monster that I can make naturally with my Tearlaments helps a lot, not just for the sake of getting the draw when you use it for material, but just for the sake of maybe needing another material on board to go into something like an elf, because a lot of times you're not really able to make the Mud Dragon unless you have like a Bestial or something else in your graveyard, so this is just kind of more generic and honestly really helpful. And then the last fusion is going to be the Dragos Depelia. This card is honestly one of my most used cards. I know that a lot of people that topped the YCS said that it didn't really come in that clutch, but for me, it's what I make during my opponent's turn more often than not. Like, if I set up my board and they try to, like, crack it, or if I have a way to, like, send cards, I'm typically making this for another interruption, and I think it's just really good. Then we obviously have our Baron de Flor, even easier to make now that we are playing the Diviner of the Herald. And that is it for the synchros. We are playing a Abyss Dweller, a Baguska, and a Time Thief Redoer. Now, this is something that is just standard. The Time Thief Redoer is a little hit or miss, but I like the ability to be able to use it with the Tearlament cards. That way I can actually fuse, because it does not detach for cost. The detach is effect. But the one thing I want to mention is Baguska is kind of a pseudo Mystic Mine out. Assuming that you have 2 level 4s on board and that's it, you can make the Baguska, and that will still lock them out of playing, because the Baguska's effect is not an activated effect, so mine doesn't stop it. But eventually, the Baguska is going to destroy itself when it runs out of materials, leaving you on 0 monsters, and thus getting rid of the Mystic Mine. So just kind of a little cool interaction there. And then the last XYZ is the Zeus. Abyss Dweller plus Zeus is pretty much game in the mirror match, so you gotta play it. And that is it for the XYZs. Onto the links, we have 1 copy of Asa and 1 copy of Dark the Dark Charmer. These are the way that you get into your sprite links. The Asa, because if it is an Ishizu tier mirror match, you can just reborn one of their, one of their Ishizus. But not just that, even if this doesn't resolve, you force out one of their Ishizus. So let's say you're up in the mirror match and they just have 1 Ishizu in the grave, that will be able to shuffle back your monsters. By activating this, they either let you take it, or they have to use it immediately, and either way, then they don't have it to use against you, so just kind of a really cool utility there. But the most important part is that they are 2s, that way we can make our Sprite Sprind and our Sprite Elf. Sprite Sprind is able to send the Merly if we need it, and Sprite Elf is able to reborn either the Merly or the Diviner, which just gets us into a ton of plays, and that is the extra deck, so hopefully you guys enjoyed the profile. And there you guys have it, that is going to be my updated Ishizu Tearlament deck profile, again using a combination of what I have learned with testing at locals, as well as the results of the YCS Pasadena this past weekend. So hopefully you guys enjoyed and learned something. If you did, you know the deal. Make sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, like, comment, share with your friends, maybe consider supporting me on Patreon, but thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.